Serious people who have almost been in the wrong place at the wrong time. What almost happened? Story 1. My friends wanted to hang out, but I didn't like them anymore because they were druggies, so I made an excuse. By hang out they meant beat a jogger to death with hammers while his wife watched. They all got life in prison. I sometimes think if I would have been able to stop them. Story 2. In my sophomore year of high school, my older cousin was getting married. ID originally talked my mum into letting me stay home that weekend instead of traveling the 7 hours to the event. I was going to go with some friends to a basketball game for something to do on Friday night. But on Thursday my mum decided I couldn't miss the wedding and made me go with the family Friday after school. Friday night after we got to the hotel I got a phone call. My friends that I was going to ride with to the basketball game were in a bad car accident. 2 died. It took years of survivor's guilt to get over that, because those 2 would have driven in a different car if I'd been there. Story 3. Going back home from the bakery with my aunt, for some reason she decided to cross the street, which was unnecessary cause my house was on that same sidewalk. As soon as we crossed the street, a car crashed at that very same place we were, breaking into a house. The driver was absolutely drunk. I was like 6 or 7 when it happened. Story 4. My family vacationed in Paris for a week in the mid-90s. I was about 10 years old. My mom and stepfather were planning to go to the Arc de Triomphe on a certain day, but I wanted to go to the Eiffel Tower. When I was told we would see the Eiffel Tower another day, I threw a fit. Don't know why it was so important to see the Eiffel Tower that day and not 2 days later. It became a whole argument between me, my stepfather, and my mom. My mom caved to probably just shut me up and we went to the Eiffel Tower that day, and my stepfather was pissed the rest of the day for my mom caving. We got back to the hotel and saw that a pipe bomb had gone off near the Arc de Triomphe and a bunch of people got hurt. The last we spoke to any other step family was before the fight, and my stepfather told them we were going to the Arc de Triomphe that day and they were frantically calling the hotel to try and get a hold of us. So my brattiness might have saved us from a pipe bombing. Story 5. When I was about 13, I came home from playing outside, entering the house into the kitchen through a side door. I walked through the kitchen and into the front of the house, and started up the stairs. Halfway up the stairs, I heard a crazy loud metallic clanging, like pots and pans were falling, and falling and falling. I came running downstairs to find that the pressure cooker top had popped off, shooting into the ceiling, and the pressure release propelled the cooker into the living room, smashing into a wall and rolled to a stop in front of my dad on the couch. The whole time it was spewing boiling chicken grease, as my mom was making chicken soup. Had I come in 10 seconds later, I would have probably been disfigured from grease burns and maybe been hit by the flying cooker itself. Story 6. When I was 12, me, my mom, and my sister went to a dollar store late at night after a school play she had. Right when we went in, a car pulled up in the parking lot and my mom got paranoid and rushed us in and out to get candy and a soda. Right when we left, 2 men got out of the car and speed-walked into the store. The next morning we saw on the news that the store was robbed by them. I guess they waited for us to leave before they did it. Story 7. There had been a couple of armed robberies around my route home from work, which I usually walked. One of my coworkers, who lived in the same apartment building as me, was nervous about going home after dark, so I agreed to switch shifts with her so that she could get off in the afternoon and I'd take closing. I found out the next day that she'd been mugged and shot after her shift. She didn't die, thank God, but the fact that I should have been the one walking that same route freaked me out for a while. Story 8. Told this story before my college roommate and I were chilling at our apartment when some guy knocked on our door, asking if he could borrow our phone. We had this crazy roommate who went through tons of guys and was constantly cheating, so we thought it could be one of her guys trying to find some excuse to get in our apartment and wait for her. We decided to just pretend we weren't in. Moments later, we got a campus alert text saying there was a stabbing in our apartment. Found out later that the stabber was some guy knocking on the victim's door asking to borrow her phone. She let him in. He grabbed a knife from her kitchen, stabbed her in the stomach and ran off. Since there was a campus-wide party going on, he disappeared easily into the crowd and as far as I know, he was never caught. No motive at all, he was just in a stabby mood. The victim is in the apartment right above ours and our apartment was the last one on our floor, right next to the stairs. If someone was knocking on every apartment, our apartment would be the stop right before the victim's apartment. Never felt so lucky we had a shitty roommate before. Story 9. Was in Branson last week on vacation with my wife. Had a thought about riding a duck boat on Thursday. Decided to play mini-golf instead. The boat capsized killing 17 people, 9 from one family. Story 10. In high school my friend was supposed to go to a party with his best friend. He decided he was too tired and wanted to stay home and sleep. The next morning his mom wakes him up to tell him his best friend was shot and died. Story 11. In the car with my father-in-law, husband and baby boy. FIL was driving us to lunch. We were the first car at a red light. The light turns green but he hesitated to go for about a second and a half, for absolutely no reason. A car ran the red light and would likely have killed my FIL and husband at the speed it was going. And since it was on a hill, we likely would have rolled too. Highway patrol just getting off the interstate saw the entire thing and pulled the driver over immediately. Story 12. Typical cartoon scene of a flower pot flying off a balcony. It fell right where I was standing 1 minute earlier. I had since moved a couple of steps, but another guy was in that spot. It grazed his shoulder and would have been really dangerous if it hit him on the head. We called the cops on the guy since we saw other vases on his balcony. Dude was very pissed but took them in. Story 13. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, definitely was in first grade, my mom was doing drugs and dating and who sold them and did them with her. I vaguely remember him always hiding behind the water heater when cops stopped by. Well, at 6 my dad had one custody of me, but he still let her see me every other weekend. Unfortunately, my mother only saw me once every month or so. Naturally, she accused him of being the reason when I cried. One night, when I'm sitting around and waiting for her to come pick me up, and I'm sitting in the kitchen with my shoes on ready to go, my dad comes in and apologizes that she didn't show up and tells me it's time for bed. As he's saying that, or shortly after before I actually went to bed, my mom knocked at the door. He screamed and cussed at her about things I don't remember. I do remember him screaming about me being so excited to see her and her just not showing up for hours. Beyond that, I imagine he screamed about her being an irresponsible parent, knowing my dad. I was still sent to bed, she wasn't allowed to take me, and I was so angry at my dad for chasing her away and not letting me go with her. Later that same night, I remember my dad waking me up around 3 a.m., hushing me and telling me that we need to get ready and go somewhere. To the best of my memory, he didn't tell me where we were going. When we got to the hospital, my grandpa and my uncle were there and some other people I don't remember. My mom was adopted, so I don't know most of that side of the family anyways. I kept asking what we were there for and Noon would tell me. I also remember asking my grandpa for gum. Don't know why that sticks out. At some point people screamed "there she is" and watched the TV that was in the room. It showed someone on a stretcher. I was able to figure out that was my mother from what people were saying, but still didn't have any idea what was going on. Some point later a doctor came out with I think a baggie with blood and something in it. The doctor said we were able to get it out. I remember that night fairly vividly, but at the time didn't quite have an understanding what exactly happened. My mother survived. I later learned what had happened was that the cops had come for my mom's boyfriend, and he had held my mom hostage at gunpoint. When the cops heard him shoot, they busted in and killed him, then took her to the emergency room. When I went to school at a later date, I remember my first grade teacher hugging me and crying. It didn't dawn on me until years later that had I been there that night, had my dad not gotten into a fight with my mom, I could have been the one shot and possibly killed. It's years later, my mom is off drugs, she has some issues, likely due more to the drugs than the bullet, however she's capable of living on her own. Her and I aren't very close anymore as she frequently asks me for money anytime I'm around her, and we have gone years without talking multiple times due to me getting angry at her for asking for money and her telling me she hates me, I'm not her son, etc. But if anything, I have never touched drugs thanks to that event. I'd like to think I wouldn't have anyways. I have done weed, but I don't count that. Took me till I was 19 before I was willing to try though, and it doesn't work on me, so was pointless. That's my best wrong place wrong time story, but I lucked out big time thanks to my dad. Edit looks like I wasn't told the truth, though I can understand why. Just found the news article of my mother. All this time I had believed what my dad told me, but I can see why he lied. Story 14. Almost forgot to wear my helmet before taking the scooter out for a ride in the country. I hit a deer that day. EMTs and shock trauma hospital doctors agreed that I'd be dead had I not worn that helmet. Story 15. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, I was with my mom and my older brother 5 or 6, and we were on our way home and she decided to stop at the grocery store. I was asleep in the car and she had my brother just stay with me with the doors locked as she ran in to get some milk. For some reason while she was walking into the store she decided to go back to the car and bring us in with her. Well, 5 minutes later we paid for the milk and walked outside to see our car was on fire. Turns out there was a new heated seat feature on the car my parents just bought 2 weeks prior and it malfunctioned. I vividly remember getting driven home by a nice police officer, and then my mom was on the phone with her parents for hours crying about what could have been. Story 16. I was doing orientation videos at the Kroger company I had just been hired at. I had gotten enough done for the day, but still had some time left, so I decided to do just a couple more. In the time that I was doing that, someone had bought a kitchen knife and asked the clerk to remove the zip ties, you know, the ones that you have to take a knife or scissors to. She thought it was a little strange, but complied. He then walked out the door and started stabbing random folks in front of the store, talking about how you took my people's land. Anyhow, a regular there, real road warrior looking guy, always carried a Bowie knife and apparently, a permitted concealed handgun. He drops his groceries he's bagging in self-checkout, walks outside and pulls his gun and tells the guy to get on the ground. I walk out and find the door, ID usually exit through taped off, and find out about the whole thing a few minutes later. Story 17. We were looking at homes in the area and I found this home within our budget, so our real estate agent took us out there to look. We had to wait for my husband to get off work, so it was pretty late in the evening before we could go in. Well, we found out that the home was a total dump and my husband and I, who are not handy at all, wouldn't be able to handle that with it being a starter home. We decided to go back to the original home we were looking at to tour it again. Shortly after we left, there was a shooting right in front of that home and a 22-year-old died. Story 18. When I was 2 years old back in 2001, I lived in California, but my mom and I were visiting my grandparents in New York. My dad was back in California because he was on call as an ENT. My mom and I said goodbye to my grandparents and went to Newark International Airport on September 11th, holding tickets for American Airlines Flight 93, which was of course one of the planes involved in the attacks. We only canceled our flight and scheduled a later one because my dad was operating on a patient and wouldn't have been able to pick us up in time in San Francisco. If my dad hadn't been called to the hospital, we would have boarded Flight 93 and crashed in Somerset, Pennsylvania. Story 19. I grew up in a town with lots of hills. At the bottom of the hills, You could only see the top of the next hill. At the top, you could see a few miles into the distance. I was driving home from school one day. At the top of one hill, I saw some cresting the next hill. He was trying past another car, on a double yellow on a hill. If I had been one hill down the road, we would have both been dead. I still hate driving on that road. Story 20. I just got off a bus stop near my home. My mom worked up the block where my stop was. I called her and she said that she was going to pick me up. As I waited outside the stop by 711, I noticed a few guys outside the 711 who seemed off. 5 minutes later much more showed up. I assumed gang members, so I kept my distance. My mom picked me up and we left for home. As soon as I got in, I saw another group of guys walking up to the 711. We pulled away. Next morning we turned on our local news and saw there was a gang-related shooting at that 711. Story 21 was supposed to drive this narrow route back to base for refuel and food and water. We were at one end and our sister company was trying to come from the opposite end to leave the base. They demanded to go first. My buddy just so happened to be the driver in their point vehicle as I was for us. He hit an IED and died. I watched. Miss you ski, lock shields. Story 22. I got off one of the tubes which was attacked in the July 7th London bombings. I was a teenager doing work experience in London, and I remember seeing American tourists getting on the tube as I got off, and thinking about it freaked me out for a long time after. Story 23. Oh, I've got one from just the other day. My boss called me before I was about to head to work asking me if I wanted to work my shift at a different store cause one of their drivers called out. I said sure and started heading that way. About halfway there, my boss calls back and says that they found someone else to take the shift and I could just come to my regular store. A few hours into my shift, my boss comes in and tells me he was visiting that store, and the driver that took the shift I was going to work got slammed into by a Prius while he was parking, totaling his car. I know things may have gone differently if it was me, but still that was pretty wild to hear. Story 24. My girlfriend and I were vacationing in Branson just 2 weeks ago, and we rode the very same boat on the Ride the Ducks tour that sank in a storm only 5 days later. Story 25. I was out with some of my friends downtown for my 21st birthday celebrating and getting drunk. Everything was going well until we started to get a weird vibe from the club that we were in. We decided to call it a night as it was getting close to last call. My girlfriend picked us up to drive us home, and when we woke up the next morning we saw something interesting on the news. Some guy had shot randomly into the crowd, hitting 4 or so people right outside of the bar that we were at 5 minutes after we left. We narrowly avoided being right in the middle of it. Story 26. I was hanging out with these 2 guys one summer. I knew them in high school. They were 17, I think I was 18 at the time. We were supposed to go out one night and hang out with these people. We had hung out with them the week before, and it was pretty crazy. The Friday night we were supposed to hang out with these people. I even got off work early that night to go out with them. I had a bad feeling that night and decided to stay home. Apparently that night they got pulled over with cocaine in their car. They were arrested and in lots of trouble. If I had been in that car, I could have ruined my life with a drug charge. Story 27. I dodged being in the wrong place by being in a different wrong place. I was supposed to go study abroad in Istanbul while I was in college. I was going abroad in the spring semester of my junior year, but I broke my back in an accident during the summer beforehand. I was on pain meds and barely able to move, so I had to withdraw from the program. During the period I would have been flying into Istanbul for my program, there were several bombings in the airport. At the time, I took morbid comfort in the fact that my junior year of college would have sucked either way. Story 28. I traveled to London a lot, staying for a couple of weeks at a time. We're usually there around the middle of March or early April, but because I couldn't get the time off work, we had to make it the end of April instead. It was a shame because the dates had all been organized and I was only told at the last moment, so we had to do a big reshuffle. Something we do quite often when we first arrive is walk around Westminster and along the Thames, because it's a nice walk to get to where we want to go, usually one of the parks, so we can crack into the wine. I was a little down at work on the first day I should have been in London, because I couldn't help but think I should be wandering along by the river on my way to get drunk. Not at work, which as you can imagine was unpleasant. That was until I saw the headlines flash up on the screen mounted in the corner of the department. The Westminster terror attack had just occurred, where a man had driven a car through pedestrians on Westminster Bridge, killing 5 and injuring over 50, and then stabbed to death a police officer outside Parliament before being shot himself. There's nothing absolutely saying that I would have been on that bridge at that time, but everything, it being our first full day, that being on the route, the time being right for us to have been there, added up closely enough that it left a chill over me for a few days. I remember one of my colleagues looking at me and saying, "Weren't you supposed to be going there this week?" And it seemed surreal. Even if I hadn't been injured or killed myself, it's likely I would have witnessed something horrific. Story 29. Yesterday the metal awning on the food truck I was approaching collapsed to the wind and slammed into the sidewalk. I almost got sandwiched while trying to get a sandwich. Story 30. So, I have a bad history with log trucks. I physically cringe with my entire body when I see one and either speed up or slow down to stay far from it. I've almost been killed by 3 of them. TLDR, almost ran under one chasing a ball, almost crushed by one driving in my line at a stop sign, final destination myself right into the back of one. All by the time I was 19, first time, when I was maybe 4, my pawpaw was watching me play in the front yard of their trailer. They lived right on a major 2-lane back road between 2 very small towns that saw a lot of traffic. He must have zoned out for a moment, because I rolled a ball into the road and chased it, just as a log truck came flying down the road. When he realized what happened, he stood up and screamed for me to stop. I stopped, and according to my family, because I've blocked this out at this point, the truck slammed its brakes and slid right past me as I stood on the opposite side of the yellow line. My parents said Pawpaw nearly had a heart attack that day from the experience. Second time, I had my license for about a year 18 and was driving down a back road that came to a stop at another back road. My older 30 friend W was in the passenger seat. As I'm coming to a stop maybe 50 feet from the stop sign, there's a logging truck coming onto the road through my lane, as trucks tend to do sometimes. My instinct kicked in quick, and I nonchalantly drove us into the ditch as we slid past each other so that the truck wouldn't hit us. I'm annoyed and cursing and pulling the car back onto the road, and I look over and W is just white as a ghost. Dude, what's wrong? Do you not realize what just happened? If you hadn't moved, his truck would have crushed your side of the car. It took a while for that one to sink in. Third time. It's a year later from the last time I'm 19, and I'm going down yet another busy back road right up the road from my parents' house to see my boyfriend at the time. I'm going down a hill around a sharp turn, maybe 50 miles per hour. In front of me is the trees clear for my view on the left side. I realize the truck is slowed almost completely to a full stop. I had just enough time to slam my brakes and slide right into a pine tree hanging off the back of his truck, breaking through my windshield. The log came about 8 inches away from hitting me in the head. How do I know it was a pine tree? When I got to my boyfriend's house, I drove 15 minutes to him rather than 5 back to my parents' house because I knew I was about to get grounded. I was in such shock that when I brought him out to look at the car, I started cry-laughing at the pine needle stuck in a hole in my windshield. So yeah, logging trucks. Story 31. A friend and I were invited by another friend to the AUF summer camp at Utah. We decided not to go, she did. Survivor's guilt was a completely foreign concept for me up until that moment. Story 32. A few years ago, we were going bar hopping in Baltimore for my buddy's bachelor party. We got down there nice and early so we could go grab some dinner and not get stuck in rush hour traffic. This was the night of the riots for Freddie Gray. We decided to go out anyway and just try to avoid the areas where we heard there was trouble. We were a group of 5 or 6 white dudes who were absolutely smashed and ended up pretty close to the action after getting separated from our group. A guy stops us and says, "Look, it's getting pretty crazy up that way," pointing to where we were walking, "and people are getting out of control. It's probably not safe for you white guys to walk through there. I'd take other route." We thanked him and went to grab pizza. The next morning, we saw that a couple guys got the kicked out of them about 12 blocks away from where we were by a group of rioters. If you're reading this, thank you, stranger. Story 33. In the weeks before 9/11, I was looking for work in NYC. I had interviewed with a firm that serviced clients on Wall Street. All of their clients were in the Twin Towers. I held off accepting their offer, as I felt I could do better. Had I accepted it, I almost certainly would have been in the WTC buildings on 9/11. A couple of weeks after 9/11, I called the company that made the offer. The person on the other end of the line was subdued and somewhat incoherent, with odd noises in the background. I never learned the fate of that company, but I'm pretty sure their recovery was a rocky one, if they survived the aftermath intact. Story 34. There was a domestic dispute in front of my house from our neighbors. I was around 12 and was putting up posters in our block for something. The domestic dispute from the couple escalated from a shouting match to a shoving match, and the guy involved was drunk and quite unhinged. Our babysitter pulled me inside back into the house just as the guy was about to approach me. She thought that the neighbor was going to use me in a hostage situation type and grabbed me and slammed the yard gate on his face. I got yelled at by the babysitter, my mom, about minding my surroundings, but not as much as the babysitter giving our neighbor a stern warning. Cops were later called on the couple. Story 35. Playing in the rain during a progressive thunderstorm. Climbed a tree, had to, went inside to do my business. While on the crap of the power went out. Turns out lightning struck the tree I was climbing and a branch took out our power lines. Saved by nature's call. Story 36. When my sister was in college, her boyfriend was having a party on a yacht and all her friends were going to be there. She didn't go because she had to study for her test the next morning. Everyone on the boat got very drunk and crashed the boat. A few people, including her boyfriend, died. When she was helping his mother clean out his dorm room, they found an engagement ring in a drawer. Story 37. There is a popular bridge in our area that people often go to walk on and take pictures. My family stopped to take pictures on our way to a campsite when I was a baby. All my siblings and dad walked out onto the bridge, but my mom had a very, very bad feeling about it. She told herself she was being crazy and to enjoy the scenery, but it just got worse and worse to the point she said she could taste blood in her mouth. She lost it and told my dad to get all the kids off the bridge and back into the car now. He thought she was being crazy, but obliged. The next day, a boy that went to our church was on the bridge with his family and was hit and killed by a truck. My mom has had a few weird premonitions like this that I chalk up to having mom senses. Story 38. We went to the beach with all my cousins when I was little. All of us would compete to see who could swim out the farthest. Stupid, I know, but we were kids. After the last day of beach fun, we packed up and headed home, where we learned that at the same beach just an hour or so after we had left there had been large sharks spotted in the deeper ends and everyone had to leave the water for a bit. Story 39. Bit of background. We were driving next to this one car that had kids driving, maybe 14, and I found it quite odd. We were at the same pace as them for about an hour, was going on the highway. Had to pee, but my parents wouldn't let me stop. They eventually gave in after about 20 minutes and stopped. Well, that car that we were driving next to got into a crash. 3 people died there. Tons of people went to the hospital, like 4 cars and a semi. Had I not stopped, we definitely would have been in the crash. They had to medevac 2 separate helicopters. Story 40 January 13, 2018, 807 a.m., minus 845 a.m., emergency alert warning, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Type extreme alert. Living in Hawaii has its perks, like threats of imminent doom. I called my dad to tell him I may possibly die that day. I'm surprised he didn't have a heart attack. His heart was broken. He was raging because he thought he was going to lose his little girl that day. I didn't have a bug-out bag ready, so I grabbed water protein bars, started hiking up into the heights with my dog roommate. Our idea was to watch whichever side of the island the missile hit on, roll down the opposite side of the ridge. There was no time to think about any other plan. 38 minutes later, after sirens at Pearl Harbor went off, it was announced that someone pushed the wrong button at the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. Story 41 My dad's best friend was taking a job interview one day in September. He lived in NYC, so he took the subway. They were blocked up, so he was 30 minutes late. His interview was at the Twin Towers. It was September 11th. By being late to his appointment, he wasn't killed in the attacks. He was still in an underground train station when it happened. He tells that story to this day. Story 42 was playing pool with a mate, walked away to take a sip of beer as he was shooting, and his ball flew off the table and would have smacked me right in the had I still been standing where I was. Story 43 When I lived in Chicago, I was crossing an intersection on Michigan Avenue during the walk symbol, and some asshat on a bike ran the red and drove straight into the woman 1 foot in front of me. He flew over his handlebars. If he was hurt, but I hope he was. The lady was paralyzed on the ground and I helped stabilize her neck until the ambulance came. If I had been faster, it would have been me. Story 44 Just this past winter, we went to visit my SO's friend in the hospital. On the way we stopped to eat, found out there was a shooting in the parking lot of the hospital. Nobody injured thankfully that we missed only because we stopped to eat. Story 45 My dad has ridden motorcycles for as long as I can remember, and he used to ride with a group of his friends and ID tag along on the back of his bike. One of the rides was planned months in advance by his best friend and I wanted to go so bad. I was 10. I brought it up every single day to my dad how excited I was, and he planned out which order the 8 bikes would be in. We would be 4th. The night before we were supposed to go, I changed my mind because I didn't want my mom to be alone at home with access to my backpack. It had notes in it, and I had gotten in trouble for passing notes before. I decided I'd stay home to make sure she didn't find them, told my dad I wasn't going, and he rearranged his bike position to first instead. A few hours into the ride, my mom gets a frantic call from him that there was an accident. It was his best friend. His best friend was the 4th bike. A truck pulling out into an intersection saw the first 3 bikes, then pulled out and hit and killed the 4th. Everybody else was fine. I still hold a lot of guilt because that was supposed to be me. I could have gone and I probably would have taken a bathroom break or done something that put us behind schedule so the truck wouldn't have hit him. This year makes 10 years and I still feel like I should have gone. Story 46 I was at a demolition derby a couple years ago with my family, lots of little kids. We got a feeling that we should get up and move seats and go sit with family on the other side of the arena. About 10 minutes after we moved, a truck was rolled over and the driveline on the truck got ejected into the crowd right where we would have been seated. 3 people experienced major injuries and it could have killed the little children that were with us. Story 47 Few months ago, I was running a couple minutes behind while carpooling my boyfriend and I to work. Only a few minutes into the commute, cop cars rush in front of us and force us to take the closest exit. Turns out minutes earlier someone was shooting a gun out of their car and struck another. That was probably the closest as it was only minutes away and it was 4:30 a.m., so I was likely the next closest car to the one who was struck. This has happened to me other times in more subtle ways. My boyfriend was planning on attending the Dark Knight midnight showing in the Aurora Theater, but plans cancelled last minute. When we got our apartment together, another one that we had contemplating moving to had a man have a violent assault rifle standoff with police. The man killed a few cops and bystanders. Besides the fact that we almost moved there, it was very close to my boyfriend's work, so we were about a block away when police got there. So almost wrong place, almost wrong time a few times. Story 48 When I worked at Six Flags, they would have employee appreciation nights where the park would close early and we would get to ride the rides and get free carnival food. One of these evenings it had been kind of stormy on and off, and there had been some thunder warnings and flash flood warnings in other parts of the city, unknown to the employees. Nobody bothered to get the word out or think, hey, let's reschedule this. I was tired from work and opted to go home instead of riding the nearby superhero coaster. A few days later I was alerted to having to cover a shift for a coworker who had been on the superhero coaster when it was struck by lightning. Everyone had to be rushed to the ER with burns and messed up vitals. Thankfully there were no deaths, but the riders were hurt pretty badly. Had I stayed and ridden the coaster I would have been shocked with everyone else. Edit wording on a lighter note, I was visiting home from school once and my plane landed early, so I was able to get out of the airport 30 minutes earlier. Soon as we get home there's a story on the news about an escaped baboon in the airport, happening precisely at the time I was supposed to arrive, so I narrowly missed getting jumped by a monkey.